Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to my first podcast. This is gonna be a super chill channel, and we will talk with different lighting artists. So initially, I was thinking just doing voice hangout at my Discord group, but I think it could be mean a lot for people who want to join this profession, or for people like me, because I was changed my career halfway, and I swapped from photography and stage design into video game lighting. And I wish back then when I first break into the industry, I would know more people like our guests, so I could talk from them and learning from them, hear some amazing suggestions about their own career, their own story, and some portfolio practical suggestions. So this is what they glow for, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Maria. Hi, guys. My name is Sourabh Hamigi. I'm a technical lighting artist at Forza franchise, Turn 10 Studios, like Maria just said. I'm super pumped to be here. So thanks for having me on the talk, Maria.
Yeah, it is great to have you here because, to be honest, Saurav is also our first guest. And like you guys see, I am this is the very, very first running for our channel, and I named it Glow. So this is a half professional, half chill channel for mostly for lighting artists. And here Saurav is our first guest. So since we talked about your job title is more on the tech lighting, so can you share with us a little bit more, like how's your everyday task looks? Certainly, we're not gonna touch about super secret about pipeline or what is actually going on inside your studio. But usually to me, every morning I went for my stand up and I get my request and I deliver some beautiful image by end of the day. So how about everything on your side?
Sure, yeah. My role is definitely slightly different from a conventional lighting artist, and it's definitely more specific to only a couple of studios that I've actually seen. Uh, I'm basically, I report to the lighting team, but technically I'm on the technical art side of it. So I'm like the only technical artist who works for the lighting team. So I come under the lighting team, and my day-to-day goals, or at least like what I do, is basically try to make my content friends in my lighting team, like the lighting artists, their life way easier and way better. With addition to trying to get tech, like lighting tech and tools enforced into the engine, so we have better rendering, better lighting technology, and just like better workflow and pipelines overall.
Yeah, that's amazing to know. So here comes my first question, sir. So in contrast to tech artists, because usually those are the guys who helped us, like developing the tool, connect the bridge in between different software, and introduce different application to our game editor. So do you see yourself also took part of the job as tech artist? Because I am currently at your homepage for the portfolios, and I saw you get several sections. You got lighting, tech art, environment. So to me, it's like I feel like you are very good at different aspects. So how did you see that difference?
So again, like tech artist is it's a weird word, just because like I've seen different definitions take place in different studios, and it mainly depends on the engine and the kind of tools that we're using. So the technical artists at my studio, at least, is like primarily like they're basically like engineers in a way, but they don't like do like gameplay or AI or whatever. They do more like the tools and workflow scripting part. Um, so I don't really do that unless it's like prototyping or like testing things out. I don't really touch the coding part of it, even though it seems it's ironical that I wouldn't. um, but yes, I do have a computer science background. In undergrad, I have a bachelor in computer science. So by default, I would say like my background it is coding. So I have done coding a few years like before coming here, and that's probably why I can effectively do the job I do to a certain degree.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's really interesting because even like working in video games for 8 years, like take myself
Hmm.
as an example, we do touch a lot of tech side about the optimization or
Hmm.
like a material workflow. But to me, it's like I will absolutely say there's very little coding part participated in my like daily pipeline. And I think
Right.
two or three like very rare cases like we need to use some certain type of Python written small tool to introduce certain type of light property into Unreal or to the CryEngine through Maya.
Hmm.
But that is like the most, I would say, the most closest example I have with the coding. So
Right.
in your
Right.
studio, I guess it's like most of the tech artists, they are more like rendering engineering, and you could concentrate on like more on the pipeline, and those pipeline are very close to visual side.
So you meant the pipeline things that I concentrate more
Yeah,
close to the visual side. So yeah, so it is definitely like a half and half. So for example, let's just say that we're trying to. So obviously we're entering, or at least like we're in the growing age of ray tracing. Uh, we have new consoles, or like the current gen now, which is just introducing the ray tracing technology into their hardware, which is great, but that means that a lot of studios, which are primarily on consoles, like our studio, which is for Xbox, we have to sort of like migrate to being able to use that hardware
yeah,
capability to the best, right? So I guess like one of my jobs hypothetically would be to see which portion of that ray tracing tech we could use in lighting, which because like there's so many layers of ray tracing,
indeed.
and right, so it's like, okay, how do we, what's important for us, what can we support, what's in like in our budget. So that's more like on like the visual side, of like what are the technology that we need to achieve this, and what do we have to like pick and choose, and like how do we do it. And another example is more like defining a lot of attributes of ground truth. Like for example, one of the projects I had like quite early on was, we made like a Cornell box,
Yeah,
which is like a like a square like physical box in the real world, where you measure, or like you find a ground truth, uh, like reference to measuring something in real world. For us, like it was about physical lights, it was about physical rendering, because Forza is way for like based on photorealism. We
definitely.
focus, yeah, we focus about physical lighting a lot, right? So one of them was like devising this experiment, capturing data, basically analyzing it and coming to a conclusion, because the tools we were using weren't giving the mathematical result that we expected. So we were like trying to figure out like, all right, what's happening? Are the tools wrong? Are the ground truth wrong? So we just sort of like established the experiment and came out with like set of data, or basically numbers that told us, okay, where the problem is, or we have to fix it.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds really cool because, well, in my quite recent production pipeline, I had a lot of fun to adjust the exposure value between Unreal and Substance, just because we need to do some like a Substance asset auditing. So yeah, that is some amazing experience, especially when the Unreal Engine swapped their standard of the gray, because their gray board used to be 50%, and
Right.
I just figured them out like quite recently, like they finally switched into the 18% photographic correct gray standard, which is brilliant. But that means I have to redo those exposure calibration all over again. So I feel quite excited about that part. So in terms of like, see, take Unreal as an example, I always asking this question with my professional friends. It's like, how
Mhm.
you guys feel about the different exposure standard? For example, the auto histogram and the Unreal manual. Because for sure, if you go with the manual and the Sunny 16 rule could be easily introduced, and I know you have one of the character lighting piece, you almost perfectly transferred the Lord of the Ring lighting ratio from the photo to your own work. So to me, I will be very honest, how I feel is like, I think which standard measure is not what matters the most, because I think after all, it's how you control the light ratio. Is like what is the percentage between your bright light and your field light. But certainly, if the project was based on the physical lighting, or you get very accurate physical material, I think that is where that matters most, when you have to decide. You either go with the historian or with the manual. So I'll be really excited to hear your opinion about it.
No, that's an amazing example, and I think like you hit that on the nail right there. So I do a little background apart from game dev. I have freelance as a photographer and also like commercial video making for like a year and a half back in India when before I came here. So photography is a thing that I'm sort of like used to and was sort of like self-taught myself. So exposure, like understanding cameras and like how that reacts to light is like something that I know and that I use every day, like in lighting. Um, like
Yeah.
you said, I think
Uh,
you'd absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because I'm just want to say, like, I'm currently showing people your amazing photography portfolio, because I got like your link over there. So yeah, just the one like give guys the information. This page currently I'm showing on the screen is Sourabh's photography work. And carry on, please.
So yeah, I was saying like I think you're absolutely right. What really matters more than the exposure metering or like the kind of exposure you're using is the contrast ratios, which is basically saying how bright the brightest part of the screen and how bright the shadows of the darkest part of the screen is, which because at the end of the day exposure will uh, only change relatively to what you're exposing to. So and like you said, I totally agree, I almost never use the manual as exposure metering in Unreal, and I always stick to auto histogram, and I make sure that my units are an EV100 because I'm more used to that.
Yeah.
And even if I'm doing like, let's say, for example, I'm building a small interior, and I think I did this as another ground truth at work too, because Unreal is super great at this. So you're building like trying to replicate like a small interior shot, at least an exterior or even an exterior shot that we actually went out and photographed, and you can recreate all the materials, all the conditions in the engine, and you're using actual measured physical light. Like if it's like, oh yeah, the sun is like probably I don't know, like 100,000 lux here, and the bulb is like 800 lumens right here or whatever.
Yeah.
So like then you can just plug in these numbers, and you know that the lights itself are physically accurate, and the rendering is also going to be physically accurate because we know Unreal is pretty good with that. And then you know that okay, in real world we had the camera set to this settings on the manual or even this EV100 value. So you try to mimic that and see what the difference with like the image rendered and image captured of the photo was.
Yeah, it is. Because I'm currently open your wood carving lighting work. It's your color study at your art station. So one thing I will totally agree with you is actually the light ratio does the job and it matters. And to me, in my workflow, I usually does like I trust my pixel picker more than the actual like a lighting setup, because speak of the manual setup, I had a lot of fun because I tried to like archivist style personal project in my art station, and it ends up because I am setting up everything based on EV100, and I start like using standard ISO 100. My interior light, each of them goes mad number because I have to use candela just because the skylight in Unreal is candela per square meter. So I feel like my hands are pretty tight. Thankfully, it's a very small space, but I do agree with you. Like, I'm more than happy to hear other lighters say, yes, they agree. Like, the auto histogram is a good go.
Definitely, and it's also not very common that you have like I don't know which engine you use at work, Like if you're not
Unreal.
using
Yeah,
something
it's Unreal.
oh, that's awesome. If you don't use like something like Unreal or Unity, which is sort of used to having the physical tools, right? Physical lighting tools. I
Yeah.
don't know if all the proprietary, or at least the in-house engine that a lot of studios use. I don't know how they equip that with physical lighting. So I guess it like sort of depends on like what you can do and what you can't.
Yeah, indeed. It's more like because my first job starts at Ubisoft Shanghai, and we will work at Far Cry franchise. So back then we are using an in-house engine, which the source code was based on CryEngine 2. So on one hand, it's amazing because it's a full real-time engine. I was very thankful that I found my first job and started to experience some real-time pipeline. But the evil side is also because most of their exposure system or like their day and night the time of day system, they are heavily curve based. So to me, back then as a newbie, it takes me quite a while to understand how may I read those time of day correctly because they get the x and y, and the vertical is for the time, and then the x, the horizon is for the like exposure or other related data. So it's super dynamic and also super user unfriendly. That's my first-hand experience about in-house engine.
Yeah, no, I had yeah, the last company I worked at, which was WB, we used Unreal 2 there, and then like I came here, we have an in-house engine, and for someone who's been used to like Unity and Unreal all their life, it's like oh wow, it's different. It's definitely different.
Yeah, because I once met a very, it's a tech director I worked together in my previous team, and he is very experienced. And what he tells me is like, if you come from in-house engine to like a marketing engine, it's like you were moved from like a manual house to like a super high-tech place, and we were spoiled. But in a flip way, he was joking. It's like those kids get spoiled by those user-friendly UIs, and once you enter the in-house engine, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do some cool lighting, but please tell me where is my direction light. So that's my first-hand experience.
No, that's totally accurate. And I think of one other funny thing is like if you get stuck in, let's say you're doing something with Unreal and you're like, oh, I don't know what this is doing, and you can literally go to Google and be like, hey, like this is what's happening in Unreal. How do I solve this? And then
Yeah,
if you're using an in-house engine, you can't really do that. And you have to rely on people who built it, which either will be working on the company or won't be anymore. So, yeah.
yeah, I think to dig the like documentation for any in-house tool, especially if it's been like iterated for several generations, if this is a well-known franchise, you probably have some setting never changed like 10 years ago. And yeah, I would say that's a lot of challenge if you see there's no more like more experienced person in your team and who familiar with those old tools. But I think nowadays, like especially for users who are doing personal work with Unreal, so one thing I personally feel amazing is whenever I got a problem or questions, first is a community we could like ask for help, and also there's lots of like online resource for the open learning. Perhaps that's why I enjoyed like I choose this tool as my personal work project tool as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, totally agree.
Yeah, because like we talked about before, like I think the huge difference where you shared about how to work as a tech lighting artist compared to myself, because I see my job like half visual, half tech, but the most tech challenge I met is usually like how am I maintain or how may I deliver the best quality while respect the budget request. But I think to you, perhaps the challenge come from a little bit different perspective. So can you share a little bit like where like if there's any example or short story, like how did you handle like if it anything challenge work wise or like the professional wise? That would be amazing.
Um, I mean, I guess like the whole budget thing. Yeah, I feel you on that, and I think like in the composition in our team at least is like everyone is sort of aware that whenever they're laying out certain like lighting aspects, right, they're like, okay, we know this is going to be expensive, we have to make sure that like we've trained the entire team, like we're all trained ourselves to like basically make sure that every step we're lighting something, like we're not crossing the budget,
Yeah.
or at least trying not to. And I guess coming to more of a challenge, and yes, you're right. I don't really deal with like budgeting directly. So like I'm not setting that up. It's
Mm-hmm.
more coming from the engineering side because they're like, oh yeah, we have we have ray tracing on the new Xbox, but this is what we can do, like because we can afford only this many milliseconds, blah blah blah, or this much, whatever. I well, let me see if I can find an example that doesn't break my NDA. Um,
Well, if you find them later, and I will attach it to our like podcast, it's all good. But if you could find it, just drop them on Discord.
Definitely will.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Because meanwhile, I would say I think guys in our community will be really exciting to hear like if you got any suggestions about knowledge base, because well, lighting is a tricky role. It's a fun role, I would say, and we probably enjoy the most for whatever the latest tech comes out in game dev. But certainly there will be challenge because when people ask, I get lots of people ask questions like such, hey, if I want to be like work as a lighter, what should I get or what type of knowledge I might need to prepare myself? Because I am a visual person and I nerd all of the tech in my pipeline or through like whatever the online resource I got. So if like say we ask some of your suggestion as a tech artist or like tech lighting artist, will you suggest to people learning more like visual or like a computer program? Like see what's your opinion about this?
That's a very good question, and you're right. My answer slightly might differ from yours.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, the way I have approached it is like a few things. Since again, like I had a photography background and I had a CS background, I sort of like introduced myself in during that time, like through visual aspects or the artistic aspect, which is like obviously going to be composition, the light color theory, and just like how important lighting is in like any renders or photos, which sort of just like translated almost directly or indirectly into lighting in games for me. And the other aspect that I guess is a general uh, tip for anyone who wants to get into lighting is, excuse me, learning the fundamentals and trying to understand how a frame is rendered or a pipeline, like a rendering pipeline works, or even how different aspects of lighting works is really important. Because the thing that I see often with people like trying to get into lighting is like they get into Unreal, which is like one of the most used engine for lighting artists, and then you you place a bunch of lights and turn in a bunch of knobs, and you get a really good looking scene which is lit well. But for me, it's like, do you intentionally tweak those numbers, tweak those knobs, and at least understand why you're doing that? Because stumbling upon a result is definitely different from actually getting the result you want with the intended reason for doing it. So I feel like understanding the fundamentals of like how lighting works in real world and in games and rendering is like really important.
Yeah, that's really good to hear because well, when I was teaching with my student, because I'm running like a seasonal workshop, and I feel there are two type of imaging light wise, and which the first part is lots of people, at least I see like online, they actually kind of missed a bit, unfortunately. So it's not like we're like against anyone's work, but just to be clarified, I will trust before an image or a thing goes to stylish or like very unique look. First of all, rendering wise, it has to be stayed correct, such as the material readability should be well, and the exposure should be properly set up, and nothing should get washed out or underexposure at the very beginning before any post process. Because I was falling into the same trap in the very beginning when I'm learning Unreal, because I kind of feel the post process volume is way powerful. So you can almost like get a very simple setup and make the same at some point looks wow just because of post process. But nowadays when I'm teaching, I just try to remind my students is like, yeah, please make sure you knowing like why you make the decision, like why your skylight should go stationary instead of static or instead of like movable. So I think understand the fundamental behind is definitely a big call before you could move forward like a visual development or tech development. So yeah, I will be like totally agree with you point. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think
yeah,
the one point that you did mention, the materials is like a really big thing there, and I feel like that's one of the first checklists. Like whenever I'm looking at a scene that I haven't made, so I don't know how like the textures are set up, basically the diffuse textures or the metallic maps or whatever. So I think like since again like we use something like Unreal on day-to-day basis, and we know like without if you don't modify the base shader in uh, or the material in Unreal, it's going to be a PBR material. So
indeed.
your lighting is going to react uh, to the inputs of your textures in more ways than one, right? And
Yeah.
then a lot of times people would just have like this really broken like pure black or pure white textures, or just like incorrect values of metallics, stuff like that. And then think lighting is now going to react the way it does because they don't really understand that materials, especially in the PBR era, is like super important. Like they basically tell the renderer how the lighting should work, like how it should be lit. And then they'll be stuck in this loop of like, I'm doing the lighting thing properly, I don't understand why the scene looks bad. And I'm like, yeah, that's because like your fundamental of understanding why the materials are not working is not there.
Yeah, that's a really sharp shot because when I was like teaching with my students, the first class is actually designed for like a very small room and for interior lighting, and that room interior is almost like gray or white. I literally stopped my student, just tell everybody, hey, it's cool, you can do a stylish light, but please for the first practice, no neon light. So I just literally write on my course paper says no cyberpunk neon light because everybody need to understand how the light and color temperature works properly.
Right, exactly. And it's also super easy, and I've done this like initially too, like it because it's just nice to do it.
Yeah,
It's really easy to overdo things. Like you just
indeed.
want to add more lights, you want to add more colors, you just want to be like, all right, let's make this a party. Like it's hard not to do that
Yeah.
initially, at least for me.
Yeah, at least I think for whoever really passionate about lighting, it's super easy to overcome. And it's not only happened with video games, because I initially trained as photographer and filmmaking, and later when I come study in UK, I did like some stage design course as well. So in the stage design, I was very surprised because when I touching the material readability or like saturation on textures, what the environment artist, my colleague, tells me is exactly like how we do them in theater. Because in theater, there is a very interesting role about costume design. So they are not tend to use like a very great color. Because even like you probably think a theater costume will be much overdone with those like dressing or decoration, but actually they will purposely choose like the white color could be like a milky white instead of like pure white, and also for the gray color they could have like a more brownish gray or more indigo-ish gray because that's gonna suit different lighting situation on the stage. And because it's a show and the everybody was sitting and you only watch the performance by like eyes, there's no filter, there's no camera. So what happened back there is like they purposely adjust the color on the texture to fit the over strong spotlight, because if it's a ballet dancing and they will have like different intensity of the light to emphasize the movement. So when I was drawing video games, I was just feel wow, so something is really similar. And speak of like transferring from real like field lighting work into video games, because you also like you're doing a lot of photo shooting, so I believe you have similar feeling. Because I kind of feel in like the you see field lighting in real life, we control like we almost do everything to tackle the unnecessary shadow. But in CGI lighting, I kind of feel like whatever makes the shadow work, so we do it. So I feel like we are pursue shadow in the CGI world, and we are pursuing like clear light in the real world. So how did you feel about like working with like pre-baked lighting workflow and the real-time or GI workflow? So did you feel like it's huge difference?
I mean, it's funny, right? Because in I think like it's for me like the funniest thing is like looking back now, the advantages we have with like just placing a light anywhere we want in CG versus like going back to like photography. I'm like, I haven't used my camera in a while, and then I did like the other day, and I'm just like, oh wait, I just can't move the directional light anymore, and I have to sort
Indeed.
of just shoot for what's there in real world.
Yeah.
And I guess, and then coming to CG, and you're thinking about this concept of, oh yeah, GI, you can't really have the computer render the bounce lighting in runtime. You gotta like find ways to hack it and trick it together,
Yeah.
and just like, so initially for me that was like that's weird. Like, why can't the computers just do that? And I'm like, okay, yeah, of course it makes sense. It's expensive or whatever. Uh, no, but that's I feel like that's it's weird, but at the same time I understand.
Yeah.
Like, I see the realism in CG, even though like you're sort of like hacking things together and the concepts of it.
Indeed. Yeah. Because a funny part I realize is like in the real world, because I used to work for fashion photography, and like, those giant glowing soft light box is everyday life, because that's what we use to produce like any tender lighting to like for industrial or like commercial shooting. But in the CGI like this, like when I work in Unreal, there's a high chance, say if it's a multiplayer level, I have to get some shadow plan to make it work because there's too much light. So that's a huge difference to me. And that also applies to the GI workflow. So, because I recently tried the NVIDIA version of so it has the RTX GI like uploaded version. It's really cool, I would say, the bouncing wise. But yeah, I added more shadow flag into one level in particular, just because this is how because I kind of feel with more shadow plan it works better. Also, the bouncing wouldn't go everywhere, which happens in real life. So yeah, I'll be really looking forward. Yeah, it is. That's my first hand experience.
I know you said you used ray tracing. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah.
I love it, right? Like, I mean, it's no lighting artist will be like, oh, you don't have to bake anymore. Like, how about GI that's pretty good looking and like it's runtime? Like, no lighting artist will be like, I don't want that,
Yeah.
right? Like, every lighting artist will be like, yeah, I want that. But like, I think I've realized and I've gone used to with non-ray tracing is that I have more control when
Mm-hmm.
talking about baked lighting in like something at least like in Unreal.
Yeah.
Like ray tracing doesn't really give you that much artistic control if you think
No.
about it.
No. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, because so far I enjoy the ray tracing reflection the most, just because I don't really have to worry about where I shall capture my cube map to get that slightly
Right.
more accurate reflection. That's one thing. Ray trace, I will say, yeah, big go. But I would say environment light wise, yes, indeed. Because even with one of my latest piece, what I did there is I just choose my environment light, like the stationary. So I stay with stationary for my skyline, just because I need that powerful volumetric light map to light over, because I got lots of like cherry blossom in my thing. And in return, I used my sunlight is fully dynamic, just because in this version, like I said, RTX GI, so I can easily bump up my directional light to get the like overall sufficient amount indirect light. But which is why I got a lot of shadow plan. So I'm actually displaying my current work here. So all of the shadows, I control a lot with the shadow plan right above my thing. So, which is why I kind of feel after I've done this piece, I kind of feel this is more it's way more similar like what we do in real life. Because if you shoot, like you're shooting a film or you're doing some recording right on the street, regardless of what time of day it is, usually we will have like a huge shadow flag on top of it, just because that's gonna be easier to prevent either light leaking or you get the glare on your lens.
That's funny because like now you
Yeah.
say that I've never really thought of real world photography as
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you're actually lighting to basically get rid of shadows, which makes a lot of sense because
Yeah.
like you'll have a key light and then you'll have a fill light, which is basically trying to reduce the shadows on the other side. So like it makes sense that you say that. I'm just like, oh yeah, I've never really thought about it in that way, but like that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because the first thing I tried, like my first hand experience with the ray tracing, that was back to when Epic just released it. So I was like, oh wow, amazing, I got GI. And then I was lighting an interior thing. It's again an archivist piece. After I turn him on, about 5 seconds, I turn him back. I'm like, nope, this is out of my control, and I don't have the control. So,
Yeah, I mean, I guess like it makes sense, right? Because like ray tracing, well, it's supposed to be accurate, like it's because it's ray tracing back to the source or whatever.
yeah.
So I guess like it sort of defeats the purpose when you try to make a render look artificial when it's trying to make it look photorealistic, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess like it's like, oh yeah, we want to use like real world phenomena or at least like try to create a real world image very accurately, but also we want artistic controls. It's like we want to follow the rules but also break the rules.
Yeah, indeed. And it comes even more difficult when you're trying to explain, like, for example, explain to your art director. It's like, okay, well, we have ray tracing. This is amazing. But it doesn't mean we will get photorealistic image automatically. There's a lot of other work to do.
No, yeah. I mean, me for one, like, I mean, you will understand this, like, because again, like, since I work on Forza, and then obviously cars and reflections is such a big thing. It's like the only thing that matters. And and I'm like, yeah, when we were like trying out like ray tracing, and then we like saw this reflection, we're just like, yeah, I'm done. I don't want to go back to non-ray traced reflections. Like, can we just like we have to make this a thing.
Yeah, indeed. Because even like we mentioned, there's lots of surprise gonna happening once we switch down to the RTX GI or even like any other type of GI. But I still would say like it's gonna benefit us a lot, especially with the reflections, because it's like I believe for any project photorealistic like for that which trying to work, I would say that would be a huge challenge to get that accurate and convincing reflections. And so far, I would say ray tracing is still the best way, user experience wise. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Because speakers for camera, because I get like I was wondering like, do you have like any type of favorite lens, just the focus range wise? Because I noticed you do a lot of portrait, so I assume like the focus range will be around 17 to 45 or 35 ish. Do you have any preference lens wise?
I mean, I think the one I've used in the shots that I have online, most of it was on the 50 mm.
15. Okay.
And yeah, and that's like it's notorious for being the first cheap lens that you can buy, but that can give you really good quality because like you can get like really low f-stop or whatever
Yeah.
or aperture. So it's like you get nice depth of field and you get like a pretty good like angle too because like 50 mm is like it's pretty decent.
Indeed.
So it's like I guess like that's my best cheap favorite lens, I guess, because it's like not expensive. But at the same time, it's like everyone needs this. You need to start off with that.
Yeah, indeed. Because not sure if you're a fan of National Geography, because your photo style kind of reminds me that magazine.
Sorry, what was that? It reminds you of.
Yeah, National Geography.
Oh, really? That's super nice. But no, I don't think I'm I'm that good. No.
No, it's just
Thank
like
you
the
though.
style. Yeah, it's the style. Even I am a photography student, like news or like any documentary photography was never my favorite. So this is not my strong point either. Because what I was falling into back to uni is like, I love like drama, I love shows, I love stage.
Mm-hmm.
So which is why later I came to UK to study stage design and I did some apprenticeship in theaters. So I
That's
think
awesome.
that's very different because to me it's like a camera is just a tool, and nowadays I just be super lazy. I took everything through my phone. I got the Pixel, so the
Right.
quality is amazing. Yeah, I'm very happy with my phone.
Yeah, no, no, I totally feel you on that because, like, I think like a few years back, I would just carry like an entire bag of my gear and just like
Yeah,
travel around, and now I'm just like, don't want to really do it. uh, because at the same time, it just feels like I'm doing that for work now. Because like it's weird. So like you sort of do virtual photography and lighting the scene. So it's like I do this the whole day. So I'm just gonna
yeah.
sort of stop thinking about it for a while, and just take out my phone and just like randomly not think about it and take a photo.
Yeah, indeed. Because a few days ago, I got like a huge long discussion with a few of my teaching class. So members were asking me like, "Hey, do I need to get a color grading tool like Spider for the monitor?" So my first point is like my memory just get bring back to when I was in a uni when like the very first Spider is out, and we
Uh-huh.
everybody was like, "Oh, I'm gonna like spend the whole day and send tons of application," because that gear was shared by the whole faculty of photography. So what happened back then is we were so keen to do the color grading, but I think the color grading is more for maintain what you see on the screen until like it prints out with different color management. So I thought
Mhm.
that was a key point. Do you have like any? Do you feel like you it's really necessary to do so? Because I mean, professional wise, yes, but I always question this, like how much you really need a like a monitor calibrator. How did you see that?
So I've never used a monitor calibration, so I can't really speak to whether I
Yeah.
do need it or don't need it. But I've always, so the thing that I generally do is like whenever, at least whenever I was creating or now I'm lighting
Mm-hmm.
scenes, I look at the same shot and the same scene on multiple screens with multiple uh like, so I have like one which is from Acer, and then I have like another 2K monitor which is like BenQ, and then I use my phone too. So I look at the same thing with different uh color calibrations they have on the hardware level too, and also they're gonna look different no matter what because they have a different bit depth and whatnot.
Indeed.
So so I just like look at all of them, and I'm like, all right, it looks great on this, it looks bad on this, and it looks okay on this. And then my aim usually is like I'm going to sacrifice the one that looks the best a little bit just to make it look better on the worst thing. So I try to make it look good on all of them.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna drag the color management, the most scary topic in digital film and visual production into our talk. But usually, what I learned from like other tech artists or like people more experienced than myself is like we just stay with the Rec 709 because that's the nearest, but Unreal Rhythm fine. Because I asking a lot of question about like color management in recent ways like professional friends or like people in the film industry. Seems the
Mhm.
answer is more or less the same. Because I was so excited when you mentioned. I just took out my phone and check it. Because so far I feel that's a pretty good one. Because I used to check like my stuff on an iPad or a phone. Because my phone is from Google and iPad is from Apple. So I said, yeah,
Right.
different screen. Yeah, I have different screen with different manufacturer standard. We can just use them as a reference. So
Exactly.
for whoever is listening, I guess Saurabh and me both agree. You can just check different screen.
Right. So I think like the other point is like you can have the most expensive, like probably the true colors displaying monitor in
Oh
the
my
world,
god,
and it's
that's
like
fancy.
super expensive.
Yeah.
Let's just say that you have that, right? But like then the work you're creating, think about the 90% of the audience. What are they looking at your work through. So are they going to be able to see what you see? So for me, I'm like, well, most of the people are probably browsing online through their phones, and
Yeah.
they probably have like something similar to mine, or like better or even worse or whatever. So it's like if I can't make it look good on like the most used device in the screen, like what's the point in like making my work look good on like the best screens in the world?
Yeah, indeed. Because I always joking like, yeah, after you spend tons of hours for color grading, expect someone just browsing them on the phone, and don't
Right.
complain about it.
Yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah, it is. And we almost reached the end of our talk today. But the last question I will ask for our community is do you have any suggestion about build up a tech or tech lighting artist portfolio? Because I believe in your portfolio, I see like different tools you develop or like your purely visual development. So how
Mhm.
did you suggesting about see if we need a balance between like say how much tech demo I need to show or how much visual? Do you have like anything suggested?
I think generally, just understanding the rendering pipelines in video games and really understanding how like lighting works, like on every level. You don't necessarily have to go in there and write your own PBR shader, or write your own like probe-based GI system or whatever. But understanding it on an abstract level, I think like helps a lot when you want to get into a technical art position lighting. And apart from that, I think like just like reading a lot of things online. So most of my knowledge is like I just read SIGGRAPH papers, a lot of GDC docs. It's really easy, especially in lighting, to get misinformation online. Like you can go to YouTube, but then like look for how to light something, and then you might end up with a nicely lit scene, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing the right thing to get that. Um, so I guess like a lot of SIGGRAPH and GDC papers, these are from professionals in the industry, so you know that there's no misinformation. And also like there's a lot of, I think there's talks, and I think Maria also has a talk on experience points or something like that. So stuff like that, which is basically given by industry professionals, which are more accurate, which are more like probably like true. So you should go
Oh,
through
thank
that.
you.
And then a bunch of practicing, because like I'm sure like, and Maria will probably agree to this too, no matter if you see 5 or 10 artworks which is like really good on someone's art station, there's probably 100 other okay and bad works that we've practiced to get there.
Yeah, indeed, guys. Well, with no shame to share, before I get my first job, I have more than 40 rejection letter in my email, and I trust it's still in my email.
Yeah, so like yeah, I think you just practice and practice. Like there's so many scenes. I'm like finish it 95%. I'm like, this looks bad. I'm not gonna put it up. And I've spent so much time in it, but you
Yeah.
learn so much from those things.
Yeah, because I was just like picking at your resume, Sarah. So I get you knowing tons of software, 3D post editing, and also like material build. So I think learning software is actually it's a like really huge commitment because it's time consuming. And to myself, I took like a very simple role. It's like I will only learn stuff for what I need. But usually, see, light-wise, I spend a lot of time to like reading through fundamental stuff to understand how the basics goes. It goes back to the topic we talked about earlier for the photography principles. So it's exactly the same learning path to me. So how did you like went through so many different softwares? Like how what is your learning path?
So I guess like most of my softwares came from the experience. Like for example, I have After Effects, Adobe Lightroom, and Photoshop, and all this or Premiere. So these all sort of came from my photography days, where I had to like self teach myself. And most of these softwares, at least, like I taught myself from YouTube, and just like doing work and just like basically going through those. But there's a lot of websites now. Like I think I used this website called Skillshare a couple of months ago, which I think has like really good classes on like any software you want either. So if you want to learn that, like that would be great too.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. We almost reached end of this course. So, Sharp, despite your art station and Twitter, where shall we find you? Did you use any other social media?
I do have Instagram accounts. I have one which is like just for my personal account, and then this one just where I just share my art. And I have such a unique name, so you should be able to just find my first name and last name like
Definitely.
anywhere on the social media, and you
Yeah.
should probably find me. So it's the same thing on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit, anything. Just my first name, Saurabh, with my last name, and you should find me.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks you. Thank you very much to have this call. It's just really great to speak to you, and we got tons of insight working as a tech lighting artist. So later this will be shared to our community for sure. So guys, if you are curious, and just check Maria and Lightbulb. That is our Discord community, and we got tons of new episode comes very soon. And thank you once again for joining our talk today, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on this, Maria. It was very fun.
Yeah, it is amazing. Thank you.